George just brought up that you don't have to adjust, but Jalen Milroe at Alabama with the Bryce Young injury, they're going to have to adjust, right?
There we go.
So that's a completely different story, and I'm ready to do that. Well, that's personnel change. But with Bryce Young out there, they're going to fly it as it is. But other programs week to week have to make big adjustments to get around this thing. It's just like watching the Patriots over the last couple of years. 2-3 years ago with Tom Brady, they had one game, they only ran it 6 times. Last year with Mac Jones, they only threw it 3 times. Like they recreate themselves to get past today's monster because they're just not that talented. But when you're down there in college, these guys are like, look, you know what's coming, buckle it up, brace yourself. That's it. If you're those big Jurassic Park looking monsters. Sorry, Yogi.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be the beauty of the expansion of the playoff, right? Like, so we get to see more of those teams get in there, which I think will make it more exciting because we know what the 3 rosters are that are elite, right? Everybody knows that heading into the season.
Right.
So with that said, let's rip through the rest of the SEC because there's a bunch more I want to get to. Got Bryce Young injured. What do we think about that? Like, let's hope he's the best. We've all been around him respectively, and he's as good of a young man as there is in a game. Every young quarterback should model their life after a lot of his. Lane's got it rolling right now. They take down, I know, George, you love Kentucky coming into the season. And then like A&M, like
weird.
It's just, yeah, George, I know you spent time there in the offseason. Like what do these things happen? So let's start, Felder, let's start with you on Bryce Young. Like, what do you think this does for Bama? I mean, obviously anybody's vulnerable in this era of the game when you don't have a ton of depth at quarterback. I mean, he looked pretty good when he got in. Where do you think this nets out for them?
Yogi, I want to put it back on you. Like, what do you think this does with the like? I'm a guy that's had shoulder injuries, and the difference between being a defensive back or a linebacker that has a shoulder injury is you slap a Douglas restraint on, they give you a couple ibuprofen, and then you go out and keep playing football. But for a quarterback, if you can't get your arm up over here, you can't get all the way to here, then you got a problem. And so it's in the whole thing he has to deal with from a sprained AC joint is he's got to deal with that inflammation. He's got to deal with that pain management. So because you also can't be as accurate without if they're numbing your arm or trying to decrease the pain that you feel, you're not as accurate. And so I think that's going to be interesting. But I also think it's going to be interesting to see Jalen Milroe and Jahmyr Gibbs completely turn this offense on its head and become a rushing offense. Yogi, I wanted to hear from you first because, like, you're an offensive guy. Like, you're my offensive guy. What do you like? What do you think? You think they can do it? Because I think the offensive line is kind of excited that, like, oh, we just get to push people around.
Yeah, well, I think it's everybody that George has talked to around like coaches game planning for one of these monster teams. Like that, nobody game planned for this, right? So now it's like totally flipped heading into the A&M week, which we all were excited about this game, of course, for obvious, dramatic, ridiculous reasons this offseason. But now we look at it, and I think Nick Saban, to the point of the Patriots, is going to adjust brilliantly. Like, I think Bill O'Brien, like, I'm so excited to watch the game plan. I'm also excited to see what happens at that position because, George, we were around Ty Simpson. Felder, you've been around him. Like,
yeah,
dude I think he's the next guy there. And I know when you walk into that program, like, you're either in or you're in the way. And I know how intense and serious Ty is. So I'm sure he's always prepared as though he was the starter. Granted, it's a totally different world, but you go back in time under Nick Saban, regardless of coordinator, remember the players that have won at quarterback pre-Tua? A lot of dudes that aren't playing anymore or didn't play after Alabama or didn't play much or played in leagues in another country. Like,
and they were getting wins out of those guys.
Yeah, so I just think that this is going to be about efficiency, confidence, riding, like, whatever the one or two things this young man does best. Clearly, QB run game is going to be a part of that, RPO, zone read, etc. But they're smart enough to not put themselves in the position because, to George's point, like, what do you always call them, the Roman army? Like, they're loaded. They got the best defensive player in America. They got a lot of talent. Like, I don't see them trying to run the Bryce Young offense. And for Bryce, if we're being real, like, he's an insane competitor. We all watch what happened with Tua. We
Yes.
know how quickly he came back. It was one of the more unique approaches to health when he did come back in terms of how they repaired his body. Not talking about with the Dolphins, but back in Miami or back in Alabama. Yeah. So I don't know, like I don't think Bryce is a guy that's going to shut it down for the season because he's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 draft picks in the country.
Right.
But I also don't think that when you're talking about the shoulder, as you referenced, it's wise for anybody, whether you're trying to play European football in Paris or if you're trying to play as the number 1 draft pick next spring. So I don't know where he'll net out, but I don't think he'll do anything that's ridiculous and put himself in jeopardy. It's kind of how I net out.
I would agree. So the coaching, they're rich, and the talent and depth, they're rich. And yes, they will make modifications. Jalen Milroe, supremely talented, but again, he didn't get practice reps. Sure. I don't even know. And I'm sure he played against, Barbecue State in whatever weeks Alabama was playing at Barbecue State. I hope he got in and got a chance. But when the captain goes out, the El Capitan, the rock star, and Alabama usually doesn't have rock stars. Seems like they've had them late of quarterbacks. But when the captain goes out trots this youngster, hadn't thrown a ball since pregame and just having fun there. He wasn't throwing balls like, man, here in about 12 minutes, this stuff counts. He's just throwing the ball. Now he's out there. Trust takes place. And I went back and watched this game. Trust starts to take place from the standpoint, and I found it. I'm going to do something on here. I'm going to do something that we haven't done on here, and I hope it works. So here you go. I watched this play out, and what you're watching there at home is Jalen Milroe take off, 3rd and 15, and go the distance.
Yeah. That was a 70-yard run, right?
70-yard run. So when I say trust, first of all, in passing situations, Bill O'Brien says, okay, we still have to throw the ball. We're going to widen guys out, empty it all out, and I'm going to give this kid some automatics. Yogi Felder, you know what I'm talking about. Don't read anything.
Space.
Don't read shit. Just look right here. He'll be there waiting for you. It's just like in the movies. He'll have an envelope for you. Drive by, pick it up, get on with it. Don't talk this shit. Just get it over there. That's it. Boom. Receiver takes it on a screen, goes the distance. He throws another little easy ball over there. Now he can say, trust your home run hitters. Jahmyr Gibbs. Couple big old 65, 70-yard power run down the middle deals where the kid hands off, he's watching from a distance, and he goes, whew. And then, so coordinator, your home run hitters, and last element of trust your feet. When all else fails, and you haven't had a whole bunch of these scenarios, you're in the middle of traffic, and the lights blinking both red and green at the same time. You know what? I got 2 great feet. Gone. So, yes, they will modify. Yes, this is still the Roman army. And yes, this kid can get wins against these next couple opponents when you've got A&M, and I think they got Tennessee, and they got a couple other ones. Yes, hard. They can hold it down. They should hold it down. Give Bryce a chance to rest. Don't rush him in. Don't shoot him up. You're all good. You got plenty of weaponry. You just got to disperse the weight. He's carried so much. You got to disperse it back out, displace it back out and around. Jahmyr Gibbs is Alvin Kamara from the Saints. For those of you that are watching the NFL all the time, this is like Alvin Kamara's little brother.
But they also know how to use him now better.
They know how to use him, and now he's in there. So that's a long-winded way of saying I think these guys are all good, and you can get Bryce his rest. And I think they go down. Now, Jimbo Fisher, who's beaten Bama with a 3rd stringer, with Bryce Young starting, this could be the great typical rebound for a Jimbo Fisher type team. Just imagine. I
can imagine. I mean, he'll be
A&M trips him up. Fisher back doing this.